What if nobody ever got old? Not immortality, not living forever, just staying physically young. No wrinkles, no weak bones, no dementia, no aging organs slowly shutting down year after year. You could still die in an accident. You could still get sick. But if nothing killed you, your body would remain 25 years old indefinitely. At first, this sounds like the greatest thing humanity could ever achieve. For thousands of years, humans have feared aging more than almost anything else. Ancient emperors searched for immortality elixirs. Alchemists believed aging was a disease that could be cured today. Billionaires spend millions trying to slow biological decay by just a few years. Because deep down, almost everyone has imagined the same fantasy at least once. What if I never had to grow old? But according to scientists, a world without aging wouldn't become paradise. It would become something completely different. And possibly far more disturbing than people expect. Right now, every human society on Earth is built around one invisible assumption. People die. Not eventually. Constantly. Every city, economy, relationship, government, career, and generation only works because older people disappear and younger people replace them. Civilization itself is designed around biological turnover. And if aging suddenly stopped tomorrow, almost every system humans depend on would begin breaking in ways nobody is prepared for. The first thing that would disappear is probably something you never think about. Childhood. Because in countries where life expectancy increases, birth rates already collapse naturally. This has happened almost everywhere. The longer humans live, the fewer children they tend to have. Now, imagine a world where people remain biologically young forever. Why rush to have children at 25 if you could do it at 200? Entire generations might delay parenthood for centuries, and eventually, governments would likely have to limit births entirely. Otherwise, population growth would become mathematically impossible to sustain. Some researchers have actually modeled this. Even with relatively low birth rates, an ageless population would eventually overwhelm Earth's resources, unless reproduction became heavily controlled. Which means something strange would happen. Children would become rare, not because humans stopped loving them, but because civilization could no longer afford them. And over time, society would slowly transform into a world dominated almost entirely by adults who never leave. No new generations replacing the old, just the same people accumulating more time, more money, more experience, more power, forever. But think about that for a second. Right now, most billionaires, politicians, CEOs, professors, and world leaders eventually disappear. History resets itself generation by generation. But in a non-aging civilization, powerful people might remain in control for centuries. The same politicians, the same corporations, the same cultural elites. Imagine competing for a job against someone with 180 years of experience. Imagine housing markets where nobody dies and nobody gives up property. Imagine universities where professors never retire. Human civilization depends much more on generational replacement than most people realize. Without it, society could become unbelievably stagnant. And history already gives us small glimpses of this. In systems where leadership becomes frozen for too long, innovation slows down dramatically. Because younger generations don't just replace older people physically, they replace ideas. Music changes because generations change. Fashion changes because generations change. Politics changes because generations change. Even morality changes because generations change. A world without aging might eventually become a world where culture itself stops evolving. But the strangest consequences wouldn't be economic. They would be psychological, because the human brain was not built to experience endless time. Researchers studying perception have discovered something strange about memory. As we age, time appears to move faster, partly because fewer experiences feel new. Novelty stretches time. Repetition compresses it. That's why childhood summers felt endless, and why entire adult years now disappear almost instantly in memory. Now imagine living not for 80 years, but 800. How many decades before experiences begin repeating themselves emotionally? How many birthdays before they stop feeling real? How many conversations before people begin sounding predictable? Some psychologists believe mortality gives human life structure. Not because death is good, but because limits create meaning.
You value moments partly because you know they end, and humans behave very differently when time feels infinite. There's actually a psychological effect called temporal discounting. People naturally delay decisions when consequences feel far away. Now imagine infinite tomorrows. Why confess your feelings today if you could always do it later? Why pursue your dream this year if centuries remain ahead of you? Why take risks at all? An ageless civilization might slowly become emotionally paralyzed, not because people are unhappy, but because urgency disappears. And without urgency, human motivation begins collapsing in strange ways.
But there's another problem almost nobody thinks about: trauma. Right now, humans survive psychologically partly because memory fades. Pain softens over time, grief changes shape, old emotions weaken. But what happens if a mind remains alive for centuries? Some neuroscientists already believe the human brain struggles under long-term psychological accumulation. Even normal human lives carry decades of regret, loss, anxiety, embarrassment, heartbreak, guilt, and fear. Now multiply that by 10 or 20. Could a human mind even remain stable after centuries of emotional memory? Nobody actually knows. And there's a darker possibility. If humans stopped aging biologically, they still wouldn't stop fearing death, because immortality is not invincibility. People could still drown, crash, bleed, burn, disappear. Which means something ironic might happen. Humans could become even more afraid of dying than they are now, because death would no longer feel natural. It would feel accidental, unfair, catastrophic. Losing a 40-year life feels tragic, but losing infinite future years? That could become psychologically unbearable. And eventually, society itself might become obsessed with safety. Extreme safety. A civilization where people avoid danger at all costs, because every death represents the destruction of potentially endless existence. And this is where the fantasy of eternal youth starts becoming strange. Because humans don't just organize life around survival. We organize it around endings. School ends. Careers end. Relationships end. Generations end. Life ends. Endings give shape to existence. Without them, time itself may begin losing meaning. And maybe that's the real reason humans have never evolved to live forever. Not because biology failed, but because endless life creates problems evolution never needed to solve. For almost 300,000 years, humans lived knowing time was limited. And that limitation shaped everything: love, ambition, art, family, risk, memory, meaning. We spend our lives trying to escape aging. But if aging disappeared tomorrow, humanity might discover that death was never the only thing giving life value. Sometimes it was the fact that time was running out.